Ever heard of the EH S4? No. Well, don't worry, you're not alone, because this car was never supposed to be famous. Holden built it for one reason only, to silently dominate Australian motorsport. And once it hit the track, it did just that. Back in the early 60s, Holden wasn't struggling. They were running the streets of Australia. But the problem? Ford was winning on the track. And Holden? They didn't have an answer. Not yet. Then came the EH S4, a factory-built sleeper car so fast and so tough that it didn't just compete, it wrecked the competition. But Holden made a critical mistake. They built only 120 of them. And because of that, this absolute monster of a machine nearly faded into obscurity. So, how did a forgotten Holden become a racing legend? And why is it now one of the most sought-after collector's cars in Australia? Buckle up, because this is the story of the lost legend that destroyed everyone. But before we talk about the carnage this thing caused on the track, let's rewind. Because to understand why the EH S4 even existed, you need to see how Holden went from a simple saddlery shop to a company hell-bent on domination. Now, Holden wasn't just another car company. By the time the 50s rolled around, they were a juggernaut. They weren't building cars for luxury. They were building cars to own the Australian streets. It started in a saddlery shop in 1856, but fast forward a century. Holden had become a powerhouse. The 1948 Holden FX was the first true Australian-made car, built to handle brutal outback roads and city driving alike. It was a game-changer. And Australians? They loved it. By the early 60s, Holden was untouchable in daily cars, but there was a problem. Ford was killing them in racing, and back then, winning races didn't just mean bragging rights, it meant sales. Ford had muscle, and Holden? They had reliable family cars. But Holden was done playing nice. They weren't going to sit back and let Ford take all the glory. They needed something new, something powerful. And in 1963, they answered with a car that changed the game. The EH series. Now, the EH wasn't just another Holden. This thing was different. It was lighter, stronger, and faster than anything they'd built before. But Holden wasn't done. Because hidden within the EH lineup was something far more dangerous. A car built to destroy the competition. That car was the EH S4. All right, 1963 rolls around, and Holden is ready to change the game. Their answer? The EH series. Now, at first glance, this car didn't scream race machine. But don't let the clean lines and chrome fool you. Underneath, this thing had serious firepower. The big upgrade, the red engine. This wasn't just an improvement, it was a revolution. It had a better design, ran smoother, and burned fuel more efficiently than anything Holden had ever put in a car. And Australians? Oh, they ate it up. Holden sold over 250,000 EHs in just 2 years. That's insane. But Holden wasn't just making cars for the streets anymore. They had bigger plans. They needed something that could win. And if they were going to take down Ford on the track, the standard EH wouldn't cut it. So, behind closed doors, Holden engineers got to work. They took the already powerful EH and tuned it fit for battle. The result? The EH S4. Here's the wild part. Holden didn't even advertise this thing. No flashy campaigns, no big announcements. This was a purpose-built machine, made for one thing: racing domination. And they only built 120 of them. That's it. Why? Because to enter a car into Australian racing, manufacturers had to sell a limited number to the public. Holden wasn't interested in mass-producing this beast. They just needed enough to satisfy the rule book. And that's exactly why the S4 became a ghost, a hidden gem, a lost legend that only a few lucky people got their hands on. But those who did? Oh, they got something special. Because here's where things get real. The EH S4 wasn't just another Holden. it was Holden's first real shot at proving they could build a race-winning monster. And where better to test it than the ultimate proving ground? Bathurst. Alright, so now Holden got this secret weapon, the EH S4. It's lighter, it's tougher, it's packing a stronger gearbox, bigger fuel tank, and upgraded brakes. But let's be real, none of that matters if it can't deliver when it counts. And in 1963, Holden finally put the EH S4 to the ultimate test. Bathurst 500. Now, if you know anything about Australian racing, you know Bathurst isn't just a race, it's a war zone. Back then, it was a grueling 500-mile endurance race on the treacherous Mount Panorama circuit where only the toughest machines survived. Ford had their contenders, other manufacturers were bringing their best, and Holden? They had something to prove. Picture this. The starting grid, engines growling, drivers gripping the wheel. Holden's EH S4 is lined up, looking like just another sedan, but under the hood, it's built to destroy. The race kicks off, and instantly, it's a dogfight. Tires screeching, cars diving into corners, the track chewing up weaker machines. And the EH S4? It's holding its own. That red engine is firing on all cylinders, delivering raw power and reliability. It's fast, it's smooth, and most importantly, it doesn't break. See, back in those days, Bathurst wasn't just about speed. It was about survival. And while other cars struggled, the EH S4 just kept going. This race wasn't just about bragging rights. It was Holden's way of proving they could build a car that could take on Ford and win. And guess what? It worked. Holden's performance at Bathurst cemented the EH S4 as a racing contender. It wasn't the flashiest, it wasn't the loudest, but it was a machine that could take a beating and still deliver. And in Australian motorsport, that's what makes a legend. But here's the crazy part. After proving itself on the track, the EH S4 didn't stick around. In fact, Holden built so few of them that it practically disappeared overnight. And today, if you can find one, you're sitting on a piece of Australian racing history. So, here's where things get weird. After proving itself at Bathurst, you'd think the EH S4 would become a Holden legend overnight, right? A household name? A car that dominated racetracks for years? Nope. Instead, it practically vanished. Holden had only built 120 of them, just enough to satisfy racing regulations. And once those were sold, that was it. No mass production, no big marketing push. It was like Holden had created this racing monster, then just let it disappear into the shadows. And that's exactly why the EH S4 became a lost legend. Fast forward to today, and these things are like buried treasure. A stock EH S4 in good condition? We're talking serious money, because there's only a handful of these things left, and collectors want them. Think about it. This is Holden's first real track-ready production car. A car that proved they could go toe-to-toe with Ford and hold their ground. And now, it's one of the rarest Australian muscle cars in existence. And that raises the big question. What would you pay for one? How much is a piece of Australian racing history worth to you? Because the truth is, the S4 is a reminder of when Holden wasn't just making cars for the people, they were making cars to win. So there you have it, the story of the lost Australian legend that didn't just compete, it destroyed expectations. A car built for one purpose, to win. A car so rare, most people don't even know it exists. And a car that, to this day, remains one of the most valuable pieces of Holden history ever made. Think about it. Holden only built 120 of these monsters. And yet, the impact of the EH S4 is still felt in Australian motorsport today. This wasn't just another sedan. This was Holden's battle cry. But now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the EH S4 is Holden's most underrated performance car? Or is there another lost legend out there that deserves the spotlight? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the ride. And if you want more stories on the greatest forgotten machines in history, subscribe. Because trust me, there's plenty more where this came from. Until next time, keep the engines running, and I'll catch you in the next one.